Mr. President, it's the Constitution. You have to follow it. It's the document that allows you to. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to talk about economics, politics, foreign policy, veterans issues, reform the criminal justice system, and drug laws. This channel probably will offend you, but most importantly, this is where socialism comes to die. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, we're back. And like I said, every Monday and Wednesday, unless there's an unforeseen circumstance, I'll have videos up. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my feeling that we're in the middle of a constitutional crisis, and in some ways have been since at least the administration of FDR and the New Deal. Now, I'm going to talk about four amendments, but before we get into this, like, subscribe, share with your friends. That's the best thing you can do for the channel to help it keep growing. If you don't like what I'm saying, then go ahead and tell me what you dislike about it or disagree with in the comments, and we can have a civil debate about it. I mean, if it's important enough and you are as dedicated enough, we can actually do a show together and we'll debate. But it's going to be a civil debate because the one thing we're lacking in this country is civil debate. The Constitution, to me, is the greatest piece of paper ever written by man. It even supersedes the Bible in its importance and what it stands for because it protects the Bible, or it protects your belief that the Bible's fake. But either way, it's up to you. I don't hold those beliefs against you. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll do whatever I can to ensure you always have the right to say them. Now, the January 6th insurrection, whatever you want to call it, at the Capitol, to me, should be condemned. But so should the rioting in Portland and Ferguson and Minneapolis and all these other large cities that went on day after day after day. In the case of Portland, for over 100 days. They are just as violent. And if January 6th was an insurrection and an attack on our government, then what is it when people are trying to barricade people in and burn down a federal building? To me, that is no less of an insurrection. So keep that in mind as we go through this, because I have never, do not, and will never support any type of attempt at overthrowing our government, regardless of your reasons why. I cannot and will not support it. What I can tell you is the way we overthrow our government within our Constitution is when we vote every 2 years for local, state, and federal leaders. And the fact that barely over 50% of our country votes tells me not enough people actually care to begin with, which is part of the problem. The other problem is, and we'll go into this as it affects the First Amendment, with the government's control, which leads to people giving up on the system. What I will say is do not give up on the system. Participate in the system in the way that you can by voting. Start your own YouTube channel. Run for office. Do that. If you're curious about any of these things where you have questions you think I can answer, reach out to me. Better reach out on my social media because you'll get answered quicker that way. And those are all posted in the description. When we talk about government overreach, and this is both federal and state, and it really came into effect with COVID. What I'm going to do as I go into this is read the amendment, and then we'll discuss why I feel that it's being impeded upon or is leading to a constitutional crisis. We'll start off, obviously, with the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, this is important in a couple of ways, because you had the press talking about how you had what they call it, a generally peaceful protest. No, when you're throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails and trying to burn down buildings or succeeding in burning down buildings, that is not an almost peaceful protest. That is a riot. No matter how you look at it, it is a riot. January 6th was not peaceful. So guess what? That is a riot. Peacefully protest. I will support peaceful protest of causes I don't even agree with, because that is your right under the Constitution. With COVID, you had state and federal recommendations which led to churches not being allowed to have services. To me, that is infringing upon the religious freedom of the American people. Let that sink in for a second. Whether you're an atheist or not, whether you're a Catholic or a Baptist or a Methodist or a Muslim or Jewish, you have a right to practice your religion, and the government cannot stop you from doing that. But they try to the point of actually fining people for going to church to worship their supreme being. This is wrong. Add to this and now I'm going to go to a very slippery slope, but I'm going to tie it all together with the First Amendment, because you have these social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, which ban political figures they don't agree with. Here's the thing. I am of the opinion, as are many, that social media is the new public commons. And if you don't know what that is, in history, you had a place like Boston Commons where people can go. That's where they would give speeches. That's where they would talk about, Thomas Paine would talk about how he felt the government should work and what it should do. Well, now that is social media. And by just outright banning people, they're taking that voice away. Now, do I have a problem with anything they or I post that they add a disclaimer to? No, I have no problem with that at all. The issue is we are silencing people. Remember, freedom of speech doesn't exist so that the voices you agree with can be heard. The most important thing it does is allow voices of those you disagree with to be heard. Because if your beliefs are that strong, if your principles are that strong, if you're as knowledgeable about the subject as you say you are, then you would have no issue in having a debate with somebody that disagrees with you. Who knows? They may come into battle unarmed. With COVID, churches were closed, but Walmart and Costco were open. Now, I understand people need essentials, but these are the same corporations that, if you actually do enough digging, that their CEOs and COOs are contributors to PACs and to certain political parties. Those corporations form PACs, which support certain political figures when they run for office. And usually they support people from both parties. Why? Because they want to make sure what they want gets approved. So let that sink in. The Second Amendment, and this has been, as far as I can remember, that people have been debating the Second Amendment, what it stands for and what it means, my entire life. Now, the Second Amendment, straight from the Constitution, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, I am a gun owner. I enjoy shooting. I've got a military background, which I've talked about before, but I do enjoy shooting. Do I think any Tom, Dick, and Harry that wants one should be able to go buy a fully automatic machine gun? No, I don't. And as far as defining an assault weapon, any weapon that can be used in an assault is an assault weapon. So a double barrel shotgun, in theory, could be an assault weapon. Should they be banned? No. Should there be some legitimate thought that goes behind our gun laws? Yes, there should be. Should I have to justify the fact that I want an AR-15? No, I shouldn't. Why? Because I want one. That should be all that matters, because I'm an American citizen. I've never been convicted of a felony. I should be able to go buy one if I want one. I believe in responsible gun ownership. I believe if you're going to have weapons in the house and you have children, you teach them how to use those weapons and explain exactly how dangerous they are, and we'll have less incidents with shootings. I think we need to enforce gun laws we actually have, and Chicago is a great example. The last stats I looked at said a full 2/3 of those out on bond for gun charges actually had a prior conviction or were pending trial for a weapons charge when they were picked up this time that they were bonded out on. That tells me there's a problem in the system in a city that has some of the most stringent gun control laws in the country. And yet there's a massive gun violence. I believe if you're going to own weapons, you should train with the weapons. I live in a state with constitutional carry, and I'm very torn with constitutional carry, just like I am with concealed weapons permits. But the reason is not because I don't think people have a right. My issue is military, law enforcement, both local, state, and federal, when they train with their sidearms, they do what are called stress shoots. They're trained to push through that, to push past the heavy breathing, the adrenaline, and still be able to render effective fire. And you see in some of the police shootings that happen, they'll fire 30, 40, 50 rounds, and the suspect or suspects will only receive 1 or 2 wounds. That's where training comes in, because the average person that goes into Walmart using their right under constitutional carry, you'll see them, and usually I can make a pretty decent judgment about how well trained they are based on what they are carrying and how they are carrying it and what type of holster they're using. Now, there is something to be said that criminals are less likely to act if they believe the majority of the population around them is armed. So I can understand that. But I do think there needs to be training involved before people are allowed to do this. And that's just my opinion. And if you disagree, tell me why in the comments. The Fourth Amendment. Now, the Fourth Amendment is even more interesting because I'm going to try to tie some stuff together that maybe some of you hadn't. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. Now, we've all heard the latest that they're wanting to give the IRS power and went from any bank transaction $600 or more, and now they're talking about a cumulative of $10,000 or more. Well, they're supposed to be targeting the top 1%. That top 1% earns more than $400,000 a year. So the fact that you spend over $10,000 a year in rent or a car payment or whatever. Well, as it stands now, banks are required to report any transaction over $10,000 to the IRS. So why should we give them more power to look into bank accounts that the people are not supposed to be targeting for skipping out on taxes? That's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So what I say to the Congress and president is, you need to go back and reread the Constitution. And what I would tell the American people, that whole, well, even if they voted in, they can always take it out later. Name 10 programs or 10 things the government's put in place that they have not been able to overturn later, or just didn't put the effort into overturning. I have nothing to hide in banking. In fact, I was asked this question over a debate this weekend of, if I was not forced under criminal penalty to pay taxes, would I still pay them? My answer is yes, because I understand what the majority of those taxes go to. We still need roads. We still need schools. We still need first responders. So I do understand. I may not agree with how they spend. I may think there do need to be budget cuts. I think we need to be careful about how we spend, but there does need to be money coming in to pay for these programs. I was in the military for 23 years. Me paying my taxes paid part of my own salary. So the idea of taxes, yes, they're aggravating, and I get that people don't like doing it, but they're there for a legitimate reason. But why does the IRS need more oversight of the average person if they're supposed to be targeting the top 1%, not the bottom 99%? It's a chance for the government to dig their greedy little fingers into your pockets even more to pay for programs that aren't working, not because they're not good programs, not because they're underfunded, but because government employees historically, and as a former government employee, a state employee, I can tell you there are a lot of lazy, lackadaisical, useless people in charge of these programs. These programs have a one-size-fits-all approach to everything, and that's why they fail. The IRS being able to look into more bank accounts is not going to fix this. All it is giving them more control. You have Edward Snowden. So you had the James Clapper testify in front of Congress that they were not spying on the American people. Then Edward Snowden gave his information to WikiLeaks, and suddenly we found out James Clapper lied to Congress. What are the repercussions of that? They've been nothing. He hasn't been called back in front of Congress. He hasn't been tried criminally for lying to Congress. In fact, nothing has been done or will be done about it. Now, I just want to read part of the Fourth Amendment to you again when we talk about them eavesdropping on your emails and your text messages and your phone calls and your social media. And yes, I know once it hits social media, there is no expectation of privacy, but it's the idea that intelligence agencies are spying on the American people. And the one person that presents the evidence it was happening is lauded as a traitor by politicians. But the other politicians that supported James Clapper's ability to lie to Congress, which means he lied to the American people and he will never be held accountable for it. Why? Because these people want that information. Yes, the politicians included, because then they know who and how to target people. Now, as far as them eavesdropping, listen to this. No warrants shall be issued but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. So that means the average person, when their text message was tracked by an intelligence agency, then you're telling me the intelligence agency had probable cause to think they were doing something. When somebody's spouse texted them to pick up milk or bread on the way home, where's the probable cause in this? Well, there was none demonstrated, and yet they got the information anyway. And this is all built to use databases. And I can go more into that later because it's also what China is doing and why the idea of getting rid of TikTok could be an actual net positive for the future of 14, 15, 16-year-olds now. And the example I will use, I'll give in another video at some point because I want to discuss that more in depth. But you've got the government. Not only do we have proof that they have violated every citizen's Fourth Amendment rights, every single one with the programs that the NSA was running. Now we want to give another government agency the ability to violate the Fourth Amendment. Because even if Congress passes it, that doesn't negate the Fourth Amendment. If they want to change it, they need to go back in and vote to change the Fourth Amendment, which they're not going to do. The 10th Amendment, my personal favorite, because it was designed to limit the power of the federal government. And this is where I think we've been in a constitutional crisis for many, many years. And citizens have allowed it to happen. Most didn't even realize it was happening. And states, some of which have tried to fight it and have lost the fight. But the 10th Amendment, the power is not delegated to the United States by Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved for the states respectively or to the people. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution. What we have done, and I am not saying all regulations are bad, but what we have done by creating these federal agencies that rule more by mandate or decree than by democratic means is we allow them to seize land. We allow them to put things in place to limit what the average citizen or state can do, although they're not actually given that power by the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution does it talk about professional politicians, several of the departments we have, or the ability to not vote on a budget. Continuing resolution omnibus is not a budget. And yet that's what Congress does. Or you have the president come out and rule by dictate, where he talks about the COVID mandate for all employers with more than 100 employees. And yet there is no piece of paper saying that. It's not legal in any way, shape, or form and has never been put on paper. And even if it does get put on paper, someone or some association will have the guts, as they did with the rental relief, to take it all the way to the Supreme Court so it can be found unconstitutional. And DACA is another good example. And don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-immigration in any way, shape, or form. I think we need to fix the immigration system, and I have dealt with the immigration system, so I can say that. But we're not going to. Regardless of which party's in power, they're not going to deal with it. When President Obama signed DACA, he was quoted as saying he didn't think it was legal. He did not think it would pass muster. I'm not against DACA. What I am against is Congress not doing anything about it. President Obama's been out of office. The Democrats control the White House and the legislature. Right now would be the prime time, or when they control it during Obama's administration, to actually put into law what they want. But they won't. Why? Because it takes time away from their pet projects. Now, when states try to enforce any type of immigration lately, the federal government is coming down on them, but the federal government is not doing it. Their policies are infringing on the state's ability to conduct criminal justice. States are empowered. States have a lot of power under our Constitution, but the federal government has continued to infringe on it all the way back to the New Deal, when things were seized for federal projects. And people talk about how the New Deal got us out of the Great Depression. It wasn't. It was World War II. That's actually how we broke out of the Great Depression. And any economist worth their beans will tell you the same thing. Yes, the New Deal put people to work, but it did not get us out of the Great Depression. And now you have the federal government attempting to dictate exactly what states do or cannot do because of COVID. When we allow everything to become an emergency, then everything is an emergency. And that is not where we're at. We don't need to revise the definition of pandemic to fit the needs of the federal government. What we need to do is get the federal government out of states' back pockets and let governors run their states. If you don't like the job your governor does, vote him out. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a constitutional crisis, and we have been. And I can go deeper into it with other amendments. And some of these I'm probably going to break down, because I think the 10th Amendment is better if I do a video on its own, so I can explain a little bit better about what federal laws and federal dictates. And that's how I'm going to refer to them. They're not regulations anymore. They're dictates by unelected civil servants. But we've allowed this to happen, and we've allowed this to happen through being lackadaisical, through not voting, through not standing up, and in many cases filing suit against the federal government when they infringe upon people and states' rights. And that's how we make this change. We have the court system in which we can file suit in federal court. Every 2 years, we have an election where we elect local, state, and federal leaders. And we need to get out there and do it. You have a voice. You have a vote, but you also have a voice through social media, through YouTube. I'm just a guy who started a channel a year ago because somebody dared me, and it's gone to where it is now. And I thank my subscribers for that. But you can do the same thing. And if you're interested in it, but you're not sure about it, reach out to me and I'll help you with it. I'll help you work on it together, because there's a lot of things I've learned along the way. I am still by far not the best at editing. I'm still having a huge issue with lights. They're just, I don't know. I gave up on it and went ahead and shot the video. But I will help you with this. I want to see the average American stand up and say enough. I want Americans to start voting out incumbents. They've done nothing for the last 20 years. Let's get rid of them and put people in there who, because they don't know what's going on and they don't know the game, maybe they'll accomplish something. But even if they can't, could it really be any worse than what we have now? We have a president who's barely understanding of what he's doing half the time, I believe. And just look at some of these different speeches he's made and things he said. We have a Congress that feckless is far too weak of a word to use to describe, because they accomplish nothing other than arguing with each other and rubber stamping federal spending without actually looking at the cost to the American people. Everything has become a political game, and it's not a game. Before I give my ending to this, what I would like the American people to think about is, at one point in Roman history, The greatest thing a citizen could do was to serve their country, to serve the empire, to serve the republic. But when it all became me, and I, and people were more worried about becoming rich and gaining power, it all fell apart. And if we, the average American, does not stand up when it comes time to vote, if we do not use our voices through social media, we are going to head down the same road. Just think about it. We're going to go down the same road, and you'll see the decline of the United States as you saw the decline of the Roman Empire. I don't think Americans want that. I think the average American wants to have a good life and to enjoy living in the freest and richest country in the world. But to do that, we must demand that our rights are protected. We must demand that our government does its job. And if they are not doing that, then it's time to vote them out. If you like what I had to say, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. That's the best thing you do for the channel. I'm not worried about your money. Make donations to a veterans organization, a homeless organization, an organization that fights human trafficking. Use your money for something good, because they'll get far more use out of it than I will. And if you send it to me, then I'm going to end up donating at the end of the year anyway, as I will now since I've been monetized. And that'll come, give me a couple months to get it all figured out, and I'll show you the amount and who it's going to be donated to. Wednesday, the video will be up talking about poverty, addiction, crime, and imprisonment, because they all feed together at a certain point. And it's something I really think we need to start talking about, because Congress isn't. Most of our state leaders aren't. So let's have an honest discussion about it.